Hello all, welcome to our class today. And today we are going to discuss theoretical and conceptual framework. And by the time we are finishing this lesson, I need you to pack it somewhere at the back of your mind, whether we will say conceptual and theoretical, or we say theoretical and conceptual. Which one should come first? Or does it matter whether you start in our document, whether we start with conceptual or whether we start with theoretical? And some of these things does not mean that if, for instance, in my university, we start with theoretical, then conceptual, and yours, we start with conceptual, then theoretical, that we may be doing anything wrong. We are looking at an ideal situation. And this is stemming from our poll question of last week, where there were a few questions that were supposed to take us to the understanding of what is theoretical and conceptual framework. So I hope my screen is clear on your end. The first question was, what is measurement? What is measurement? And the responses were assignment of numbers to observations, assignment of symbols to observations, all of the above, or none of the above. And we can see that majority of us think that measurement is assignment of numbers. That is where we have the highest number of people who voted what measurement is. Then we come to the second question, that measurement is synonymous with data correction. And again, you can see that majority of us, 79.4%, think that when you talk about data collection, you are talking about measurement, or you can replace the word data collection with measurement. Is it true? We shall be looking at it today. Number 3, a good research study should limit itself to one theory. Again, true that it should be one, carried the day with 90%, and only 10% think that there should be more than one theory. Number 4, a conceptual framework must be presented diagrammatically. Again, true carried the day at 73.3%, and 26.7% think that a conceptual framework does not have to be presented diagrammatically. And then finally, there was theoretical and conceptual framework is a mandatory ingredient of a quality research. Again, 73.3% think that it is true, 5 think that it is false, and not necessarily think, 21.7% think that you can have a study without a theoretical and a conceptual framework. So this gives us the learning outcomes of today. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to have a better understanding of what is measurement, whether measurement is synonymous with data collection, whether you should use one theory or more in a study, whether a conceptual framework must be presented diagrammatically, or whether the two, theoretical and conceptual, are mandatory for a good quality research. So that is what we are going to look at today. So allow me now to share my screen on the conceptual and theoretical framework, what we are going to discuss today. Good. So I hope we can see the slides on theoretical and conceptual framework. And those who may be joining us for the first time, this is our 4th lesson of our live classes series. We started 4 weeks ago. Today is our 4th lesson that we are going to look at theoretical and conceptual framework. All right. So we have already looked at the poll outcomes, and this is what informed this class. And before we get to discussing and understanding what is theoretical and what is conceptual, there are 3 terms that I want, actually 4, that I want us to remind ourselves. We have mentioned them before, but I want us to remind ourselves because they are very key when you're talking about these 2 frameworks. The first one is a concept. The first one is a concept. And I know these are terms that we use. So when you use the word concept as a researcher, what do you mean? So a concept are those terms that enable a researcher or enable you as you conduct your study to classify phenomena, And we said a phenomena is an object of investigation. Now, when we want to describe, as researchers, when we want to define and describe the world around us, we use concepts. In very simple terms, if I can use the simplest terms to explain to a 2-year-old, I would tell them that a concept is anything your eyes can see. So where I am seated now, I can see a phone, I can see a book, I can see a pen, I can see a cup, I can see a plate. Those terms, those are concepts because they describe my world. They are describing the world that I am in. So for me as a researcher, I begin the process of research by forming concepts so that if I am studying sustainability of community projects, then I ask myself, what is my phenomena? How do I classify this idea? What are the concepts in this title that I want to come up with? So we have the issue of sustainability. We have the issue of community projects, and such that when I go to my literature review, those are the terms that I will be investigating. And I've just used a simple research topic that I want to deal with sustainability of community projects. Remember, like the example we have used in the last 2 lessons, the one that was looking at the performance of parastatals, there were different concepts that the researcher had come up with. If you can remember, there was the issue of training, the issue of resource mobilization, there was the issue, I think, of attitude. So those are concepts. And researchers, we have said, they describe the empirical world by use of concept. Just like we use concept to communicate, researchers use concepts to communicate to one another and to also describe their empirical world that is measurable. They use concepts. Now, between the word concept and construct, there is the word variable, but we will discuss it on its own. So remember, we move from a concept, then it comes to be a variable, and then we talk about constructs. We talk about constructs. So allow me first to now differentiate between a concept and a construct. Concepts that are less tangible, and they are only defined by inference. They are only measured by inference. They are called constructs. So what are we saying? That constructs are abstract variables that cannot be measured directly. They cannot be measured directly. And that is why I have said between the word concept and construct, there is the word variable. But I wanted first to relate the two. We earlier on in lesson 2, we discussed variables, but we are still going to mention them. So we have said concept in very simple terms. It is all that your eyes can see. But of course, as researchers, what we can see is limited, or we delimit it as per our title, as per our problem. So how we are defining or classifying our phenomena, we use concepts. Constructs are those concepts that cannot be directly observed. They cannot be direct, they are not tangible. These ones are not measured directly. They are measured by inference. For instance, I cannot tell you I am in pain because I can place the pain on the table and you touch the intensity. You cannot touch the intensity of the pain. But if right now, if we meet with you and probably I hold my head like this and maybe I have closed my eyes, you can ask, are you in pain? What have you done? You have been able to infer my behavior to represent something. So this something is a concept but cannot be directly observed. So pain is a construct, and we normally measure construct by inference. By inference. Intelligence, you have sat with someone, maybe over a cup of tea, but the way they talk about an issue, you go and say, X and Y, X is a very intelligent person. Did they remove their brain onto the table and you are able to read their IQ is 100? No. But you are able to infer from the way they talked, from their behavior, you are able to infer, and you can now confidently say that this person is intelligent. So intelligent is a construct. It is a concept that cannot be measured directly. So in research, we measure constructs, we measure variables. So we have said the concept that is tangible and that can be defined, the one that cannot be directly observed is the one that we call a construct. Then what is a variable? So when concepts can be assigned some values, that means we can measure and we can manipulate them. And by manipulation, it means we can bring a change to them. They are called variables. So variable is a measurable, and that is now taking us to what is measurement, the question 1 of our poll questions. A variable is a measurable characteristics which assumes different characteristics among the subjects. I won't labor much with variables because we discussed them in details in our lesson 2. So what I had earlier said, if you look at my last bullet, is that we move from a concept, that general idea that helps us to define our phenomena, then the ones that we measure, they are called variables. The concepts that we cannot touch, the ones that are not tangible, they are not directly measured, that you measure them through inference, we call them constructs. We call them construct. So I hope now you can differentiate between a concept and a construct. So when I say marital status is a measurable characteristic. It is measured directly. But when I say motivation is a concept that we cannot measure directly. So that one is called a construct. It is called a construct. So the two of them are stemming from the word concept. So concepts that are measurable, we call them variables. The ones that cannot be measured directly and they are not tangible, we call them constructs. And we have given the example. So finally, the last term that I want us to define is measurement. It is measurement. So we have just said that a variable is a measurable characteristic. That means that as researchers, we give meaning to variables. We give meaning to what we are studying by measuring. We give meaning to what we are studying by measuring. It is like asking, how does a university or a school measure, or how do they determine that their students are performing? They measure by using an exam. So exam performance gives meaning to the performance of students. And we can use the marks to say, this person is more intelligent or maybe understood better the concept than X, So we can use exam performance. So as researchers, remember we want to study variables. They are the ones that define our empirical world. So we give them meaning by measuring. And we have just said there are those that you can measure directly. For instance, we can determine our marital status in this class, or the others we cannot measure directly, and they are the ones we call construct. We measure indirectly construct. They are the ones we measure directly. For instance, marital status. Or if I wanted to know how many people are using a community water project, I can count the number of people who are coming to fetch the water. That is a direct measure. But the construct, you cannot measure them directly. So our question number 2 from the poll was asking, Measurement is what is measurement? Is it assignment of numbers? Is it assignment of symbols? Is it all of the above or none of the above? And I know many of us, the highest percentage of us said measurement is assignment of scores. But the word measurement refers to the process of assigning scores, that I'm sure all of us they know, meanings and descriptions to objects. And these objects or individuals are our variables, so that whatever we attach to them, if it is a score, it represents the characteristic of interest. So measurement does not just mean the assignment of scores. It means the assignment of symbols, the assignment of meanings, the assignment of descriptions to variables, so that the meaning we have attached to it, the symbol we have attached to it, represent the characteristic of interest. That means it represents the characteristic of that variable. And I will use the same example. If, for instance, I hold my head, the same example I have used, and you ask, chances are you ask, are you in pain? And maybe the way I hold my head, what I do on my head, maybe I'm rubbing my forehead, maybe I'm closing my eyes, you can tell that probably you can be able to gauge the pain intensity. You know, you can measure the pain indirectly, but I didn't remove the headache onto the table. And you said at 1, your headache intensity was 10. Now it is 100. It is so severe. But indirectly, you are able to assign a symbol, a meaning from what I am dealing with. So this construct called pain, you are able to measure it. So our question number 2 from our poll question, that one that was asking, measurement does not just mean assignment of scores. It means assignment of symbols. It means assignment of meanings, assignment of descriptions to a variable, so that whatever you attach to it, is it a meaning, is it a score, will represent the characteristic of that variable. And in our proposals and thesis and dissertation, the basic form of measurement starts from when you define terms. Many of us, we know that in chapter 1, the last subsection is normally definition of significant terms. Maybe your university calls it definition of significant terms. Other universities will talk about operational definition of terms. When you are defining the term in your proposal, you are measuring. Because what are you doing? You are giving it meaning as per the context of your study. Maybe just to remind all of us, there are 2 methods of defining terms. There is the conceptual and there is operational. Conceptual is the same as dictionary definition. If, for instance, I want to measure the word youth, conceptually, when I go to the dictionary, I will find probably, or our constitution may say that a youth is anyone who is below the age of 35. But as a researcher, if I am studying youth, does it mean my youth is anyone who is 35 and below? No. My youth may be anyone who is being supported by the government, being given a loan by the government. That is my youth. So I will define the concept youth, or the variable youth, operationally. So when you define the terms operationally, so please note that definition in chapter 1, you don't refer it to any book, neither do you refer it to other work. You define it as per the context. That is why it is operational. An operational definition means how you are measuring the term, how you are measuring the term. The other method, the other example of measurement is when we are defining the scale of measurement. When you say this variable is at nominal, this one is ordinal, this one is ratio, again, that we discussed in, I think, in lesson 2 or lesson 3, you are measuring. And you can see this is taking us to the question that is asking, is measurement synonymous with data collection? And the answer is no. The answer is no, they are not. Measurement does not mean data collection. but data collection is part of measurement. So measurement is higher than data collection. So that data measurement has many subsets, and one of them is data collection. So when we say definition of term is under measurement, conceptual framework is under measurement, theoretical framework is under measurement, scales of measurement are under measurement. So measurement is higher than data collection. Data collection is part of measurement. So again, I hope you have been able to answer question number 3 that was asking that measurement is synonymous. They are not. So you can see when we are defining operationally, when we are determining the scale of measurement, when we are drawing our theoretical and conceptual framework, we do not need any instrument. We don't construct any instrument for us to do that. And that just explains to us that measurement does not mean data collection, but data collection is part of measurement. So I hope now with those 4, we can confidently move to frameworks in research, and that will lead us to theoretical and conceptual framework. And we had to lay that foundation because these frameworks are part of measurement. We measure variables. Variables that are not tangible are called constructs. They are called constructs. Anything that you can see is called a concept. The ones that vary are called variables. So you can see that relationship. We needed that for us to get to the frameworks. Now, let me see whether there could be any question on that part of the introduction before we move on. All right. Thank you for those who have joined in. Mukami, happy to be here. Most welcome. Super excited for the class. Most welcome. Thanks so much. Thank you. I love your work. Leslie, thank you. There is a question by Kara, but we will be responding to it because he's asking about frameworks, the work of theories, whether we should have one or two. So let's get to the frameworks. We first understand what is a framework before we get to the individual conceptual and theoretical. Now, a framework is like the foundation of a house. We all know that the strength of the house that we live in is dependent on the foundation. And this will be taking us to our last question, question number 5. Should you have them in your work or should they not be? You know, the question we're asking, theoretical and conceptual are ingredients for any quality research. Is it a must? Now, let's look at this. And I'm sure you'll be able to answer this even before we can get to the individual. A framework is like a foundation. Foundation is the one that supports the house that you are building. So when you look at a house, I have not done construction, I am not an architect, but I know that there is no way I have done a foundation of a bungalow and then I build a maisonette or I build a block of flats when the foundation was to be a bungalow. I cannot have a foundation that was supposed to support 3 rooms and then I build a house that will be supporting 7 rooms. It is not possible. So the foundation that we lay tells us the kind of a house. And that is why when you visit your architect or your contractor, you will tell them, I have this amount of money and I want to put up a bungalow. Then they will ask how many rooms. Then you tell them 3 bedroom, 1 master en suite, a kitchen, big windows, and then they will draw it. They will have a blueprint. They will sketch it on a paper. And then that paper, when you look at it, in your mind, even if it has not become, you can see the kind of a house that you live in. But you cannot, once you are comfortable, then you will tell them, your architect or your contractor, yes, this is what I want. I want a 3-bedroom house with this kind of a sitting room. Yes, this is what you have done. The measurements are already done. You cannot now, once he has already laid the foundation of what you drew, then you tell him, no, now what you have done, we are now not going to have a bungalow, we are going to have a maisonette that has got 1 bedroom downstairs, 5 bedroom upstairs. I don't think anyone would take that for any quality architect would allow you to go that way. You would have to redo it again and now have another structure or another drawing for a maisonette. So the foundation of the house supports what we studied, the structure. It supports the structure. So if it was to be a bungalow with 10 courses of stones, that is what will be built. If it was a maisonette, then there will be the floor that maybe you have downstairs and you have upstairs. So when you bring it now to research, the frameworks we are talking about provide support for your variables. It is the one that provides support. It is that foundation that was laid that you offer support to all that will be done with this structure that we will call a house at the end of it all. So frameworks justifies the study and they explain the design. Just like we have said, the foundation you have will determine whether you have a bungalow, whether you have a maisonette, whether you have blocks of flats that all apartments. It is the foundation that determines. So when a researcher constructs a framework, it explains how the variables of the study align with the problem identified for the study. In other words, framework shows us that there is alignment from the title to the research question, to the methods of data collection, to the methods of analysis, to the interpretation. And that just reminds us that when we say research is coherent, there is coherence in research. This is what we are talking about. There should be coherence from the research questions, which are stemming from the title, to how you will collect the data, how you will analyze, how you will interpret, how you will present, how you will, all that alignment is helped or it is provided by a framework. So our question 5 was asking, do you need the two for the quality research? The answer is yes, because they are the ones that provide the support your variables need. So your variables are standing on the framework, just like the stones and the cement and everything, they will stand on the foundation of the house to make it, whether it will stand or it will not stand. That alignment is shown by the frameworks. So we normally have two frameworks, especially in social sciences, the ones that we require to have in our document. One is the conceptual. The other one is the theoretical. Now, conceptual is the overall structure. It is the overall structure of this house. Theoretical is what explains the relationship. Allow me to give you an example, or maybe let me first mention the second part, then we relate it with number 1. Theoretical resides within the conceptual framework. Theoretical framework resides within the conceptual framework. We go back to the house. So now we have our foundation and we have this. Now we start with building. So we have now a structure that is resting on this foundation. Now this structure is what we are calling conceptual framework. So if you are passing where there is a building or people are building, you cannot make a mistake of telling someone what is built there, what is standing there is a maisonette, and that one is a bungalow. Why? Because you can see the structure. So the structure of a maisonette, the structure of a bungalow are different. So you can clearly see that one is a bungalow, that one is a maisonette, that one is a block of apartments, that one is a block of flats. You can see that. So that structure in research is what we call conceptual framework. Now, what resides within what resides within it is what we call theoretical framework. So when you get into the house and there is the sitting room, there is the toilet, there is the kitchen, that is theoretical framework. And you can see, whereas conceptual is the overall, theoretical explains what is within this structure. I know you can enter a structure and you say, the way this person has built is not very good because you have to travel like 1 kilometer to go and get the toilet. Or maybe you have to move very far to get the master bedroom. Or maybe if I'm the one who was building, I would have put the window for the master bedroom facing the gate. But for them, they have put it, what are you saying? That whatever is within the structure to you has a problem. So how are you able to identify that? By looking at the way those rooms have been, the way they have divided their work. Even if you not tell them, you can say, if I was the one building, I would not have brought this sitting room at that point. I would have taken it here. So the structure is the conceptual. What resides in that is called the theoretical. So theoretical resides within the conceptual. So conceptual presents the overall structure of your variables, whereas the theoretical explains the relationships that are explored within that study. The conceptual presents the overall structure, whereas the theoretical explains the relationship between what is being explored. And of course, what is being explored, we know are the variables. So theories are those parts that support the relationship in the conceptual framework. So theories is what will support the conceptual framework. And we know theoretical framework, and we shall repeat this, is based on published identifiable theories. We will repeat this in a minute as we move on. So we start with the first one, which is theoretical. So this is the one that resides within the structure. It is the one that resides within the overall structure called conceptual. So conceptual is the overall structure, whereas what explains what is in that structure is the theoretical framework. Now, let's start by understanding what is a theory. Allow me to check whether there is any question on what we have done so far. Okay. Thank you. All right. No question yet. Kara, I saw your question and we'll be answering it in a minute once we discuss this section. So we start by understanding what is a theory. A theory. And I see even in our discussion in our group, and if you are not in our group, please make sure that you join our WhatsApp group so that you know when we are doing the poll and even when we have classes. I see how people will give explanation of the word theory, and you find that even if I was a student, I am not sure it would really click from that explanation. I want to give you a definition of a theory that is so relatable and that clearly explains to you why you need to have a theoretical framework. And I know by now, from what we have said, do you need theoretical and conceptual? From our discussion on what is a framework, I'm sure you know the answer is yes. You need them in your work because you need to explain the relationship between variables within the structure that shows you the design of your work. When you talk about a theory, and there are terms that I have underlined because we want to put emphasis on them. A theory is an explanation of phenomena after observing it for a long time. And I want to explain something. I want to start with the last part, after observing it for a long time. Now, this time is not measured in terms of days, in terms of months, in terms of years. It is measured in terms of when a pattern has been established. When a pattern has been established. If, for instance, I say, and you know, people, when you think about a theory, we remember the theories that we learn in management. For instance, Abraham Maslow's theory, Heisenberg's theory, theory X and Y, situational theory. You know, those are the things, difficult things come into our mind, but we forget where did they come from. When we talk about, if for instance, right now, I say that open and distance learners is inferior to face-to-face learning, or the reverse, it is a theory which can be tested. However, it can only be a theory if it has stood the test of time, meaning a pattern has been established. A pattern has been established. So I cannot wake up today and say that face-to-face is better than distance learning. Based on what? And that is why we do research, because we want to show a pattern of something. Something comes up time and again and again and again, and that now becomes a theory. If, for instance, in my country, the examining body for basic education is called the Kenya National Examination Council. Every time they release the final examination, they normally tell us, and this has been there even when I was a student, that boys have done better in sciences than girls. So it has been there year in, year out, almost all the years. Boys do better than girls in sciences, and girls do better in languages than boys. That is something that NEC, the Kenya National Examination Council, they report. So it has become, a pattern has been established. So it means boys performing better than girls in sciences is a theory. And now, as a researcher, I can test it. In quantitative research, we test theories. In qualitative, we generate theories. But doesn't mean that if you do quantitative, you cannot generate. But mainly in qualitative, we generate theories. That is why we have a design that is called grounded theory. But we will get there when we are looking at design. Don't get confused. Leave that, park that somewhere. We shall get to it when we come to designs. So I hope it is clear that something becomes a theory only after a pattern has been established. Only after a pattern has been established. If I am an employer and I employ people from a certain place in my country, maybe let me say a certain tribe, I employ one, they steal from me. I employ another one, they run away without telling me. I explain the third one, I find them, they have run away. I employ the fourth one, I find they have stolen from me. You know, even in our own daily life, we form theories. Chances are, by the time I'm looking for the fifth worker, I'll be saying, and I don't want a worker from tribe X, or I don't want a worker from this place. Why? I have formed, a pattern has been formed. So if you ask me, I would say people from that area, they steal. They have stolen from me 5 times, and therefore I don't want such people. So I hope that part is clear. And then we have the part of explanation. So it is theories that explain phenomena. Theories explain phenomena. So if I go back to my example of NEC, of the Kenya National Examination, they explain the phenomena of performance. Every time they release the national examination results, they explain. So theories normally explain. And so now, why do we need theories in research? Because variables do not exist in isolation. We talked about IV/DV. There must be IV that is manipulated to show DV. So there must be a theory that explains that relationship. It does not just happen. And that's why you must have a theoretical framework, something that is explaining your variables of the study, because they do not just exist. I know I use this example when we are discussing variables. If I have an ulcer, and when I drink milk, it normally brings the pain. It is only after I have drank milk that there is the pain. So this pain is related to, so this is my dependent variable, the ulcer, and milk is the IV. There is an explanation. Because of the acid, this acid causes, that is how it will be explained. So all the phenomena the variables you come up with, they are not in isolation. They don't exist on their own. They are influencing one another because they have a relationship. So there is something that explains them, and what explains them is a theory. So theories explain phenomena. And we have said, I cannot just wake up today and I say distance education is better. It must have been tested over time and again, tested time and again. That is why we say after observing it for a long time, and that time is not defined in terms of days or weeks or years or months, but it is until you have a pattern that no one can refuse. So, besides explaining phenomena, theories explain the relationship between them, and that is what we have said. And the reason why you need to do comprehensive literature review is so that you are able to identify the theory that your study will be anchored on. And the theory you select must resonate with the discipline, your discipline, and the research problem. And when we say the discipline means if I'm an educationist, the theory I select must resonate with education. If you are a project manager, if you are a manager, if you are in medicine, if you are in pharmacy, there must be that coherence between the two. Why? Because even the variables I have selected, they are related to my discipline. The problem I am addressing is related to my discipline. So we normally show our theory in what that section we call theoretical framework. And in most universities, we normally start with theoretical and then we go to conceptual, because this is the one that explains. This one explains. So you first show how you explain, then you come up now. This explanation that I have given you gives me this structure. And the structure is called conceptual. But remember, I told you, if your university starts it the other way, there is no problem. Please follow the guidelines that your university has given. Some will write their theoretical and conceptual in chapter 1, others in chapter 2. It doesn't mean there is anything wrong. But ideally, we first explain and then we show. Then we show what we were explaining is what has given birth to this structure. Before you start your research, and I want us to be very clear, and I want you to listen, because even in our group, I see students posting their titles, and they are asking people, help me to come up with objectives, or give me a title in management. Where are people getting these topics from? Coming up with a title, it is English. There is no anyone, even if I told, if I asked a child in basic education to relate a book and a pen, they can come up with something that can be studied. But the issue is there a problem? Please, before you start asking people, and our next lesson mainly may focus on research problem and how to identify problem, because I have realized we seem to have a problem. And this problem is thinking that when you have a topic, now you have research. My dear, no. Having a title, and by the way, there is a difference between a title and a topic. Having a title does not say you have a problem. A title is English. They are just English words that you have joined together to make a sentence. So a title is just a sentence. So that sentence may be saying nothing. And the nothing is because there is no problem. Remember our lesson 1. Research is problem driven. It is when you have a problem that you now look at the problem and ask, which title will address my problem? Please don't be in a hurry to come up with a title. Please don't ask people. We will discuss about problems. And one of the characteristics of a problem is that it should be an area of interest. So when you ask people to give you a problem, what are you doing? I want to impose to you what I should have studied if I'm the one who is in class now. So I am giving you my idea, fixing them in you. Is that your interest? The answer is no. Let us not be lazy. And that is why before you start writing your proposal, the first thing you do is preliminary literature review. And that is how you are able to identify a problem, you identify the theory, you draw a conceptual framework, you identify your variables of the study. Writing will become so easy. But some of us, we start with a title. Now you are left wondering, okay, I have this title on management. Where do I go from here? Because you have no issue, you have no problem. So before you even think of a title, what normally is in our mind is the general area we would want to study. I am an educationist. I want to study performance. Performance of who? Performance of my undergraduate, master's, PhD students. It is performance regarding what? Is it examination? Is it project? Those are things that you do. Then once now I am clear, now I go to literature and find what have the others said about performance. What is literature saying? Because we said a problem is the gap between what is in literature and what you want to know. So when you do the preliminary literature review, you are able to identify the variables of the study. You are even able to identify where the others may have used the wrong design, and those many other things that we are going to discuss when we are looking at problems. So before you start, make sure you have explored the theories that other researchers have used in their study. So what I'm trying to say, that a lot is done before you start writing. There is a lot. And I know let us not be lazy and we want to do it the other way. It will not work. Let us sit, do preliminary literature review from the broad areas that we want to study and identify all these. So you identify even the theory before you have started writing. Note, there are many different theories in your subject matter. And when you do extensive literature review, you are able to evaluate, compare, and select the most relevant ones. And this is what will answer our question. Should you have many theories or should you use one theory? That will answer that. So always remember, and we have said this, that the purpose of a theory is to help you explain the relationship between IV and DV, how you are manipulating IV to see its influence on DV. Number two, and this now answers our last question. Do not use many theories, and I'll be explaining this in a minute. Limit yourself to one theory that best explains the general purpose of the study. Now, I will be explaining this part when I show you how you come up with a theory. I will be explaining it, so don't panic. I will be explaining. So ideally, you are supposed to anchor your work on one theory. And the reason why you anchor your study on one theory, I want to give you an example, something you can relate with. Imagine today you go to hospital, you have a headache, you have a stomachache, you have a backache, and your knee is also paining. So you have those 4 pains. So when you go to the doctor, you give him or her all your challenges. So doctor, since Monday last week, I have had a pain here. The head started aching. It has not stopped. And the 4 that I have mentioned. I want you to think about my example and tell me, does the doctor tell you when you say I have a headache, they tell you stop there? Get these drugs, these are for the head. Then I also have a stomach, stop there. Pick these drugs for the stomach. Then I also have a backache, stop there. Pick these drugs, these are for backache. And then my knee is paining, stop there. Pick this drug for knee. Does it happen? Of course, we know it doesn't happen. I want you to see those 4 pains as the 4 variables in a study. There are 4 variables of a study. So the doctor will not give you a drug for pain in the head, for back, for stomach, for the knee. They will listen to all the 4, and then in their knowledge, they know someone who shows these diseases, these pains, could be having a typhoid, could be having typhoid. So he will send you for a typhoid test, and it comes back positive. So you will go home with a drug to cure typhoid. When you take the drug, it cures the head, the stomach, the back, and the knee. So the doctor didn't need to give you 4 drugs. It is the same thing. Our 4 variables, or 5 or 6, they are addressing the main problem. They are addressing the title where we see, that is what they are addressing. The four are related. And therefore, like the doctor identifies the four pain and they know this one means this person could be having typhoid. It is the same way. The theory explains, because these four are supposed to explain the problem. So these four variables should be explained by one theory, and you'll be getting to that in a minute. How do you identify the theory? We have two methods of identifying a theory. Number one is from literature. It is from literature. And when you go to literature, you identify what we call theory clusters. All the theories that focuses on your area. For instance, I want to deal with academic performance of students. So I will identify all the theories of learning, behaviorism, cognitive theory, student involvement theory, and there are millions of them. There are millions of theories of learning. And then I will identify the specific theories from the cluster and read on their propositions. So out of the 10 theories of learning, I identify maybe 3 or 4 that are very specific, that I feel from what I have read, this one seemed to be addressing my problem. So I pick number 1. This one is identifying, is saying this is saying this is saying this. So from the 3, now I pick the specific theory. So we have moved from theories to theory that best captures your subject matter. That means that best captures your problem and that will contribute to the body of knowledge related to the theory. And the other way you can identify theories is from similar studies. Examining theories that have been used in studies that are similar to yours. So when you do literature review, you identify someone who is doing something close to yours, the theory they used, you look at it and see whether it fits. But our best bet is normally from number 1, because you are able to do that. Now, those who normally write more than one theory, it normally steps from number 1 and 2. You have identified a cluster. You have 5 theories. Then from the theories, you pick specific theories. So like my example, I imagine the theories of learning could be over 20. But from there, I have identified 3 that best captures my study. But I have to go further by looking at the propositions and the hypotheses of this theory and see the one that best captures my problem. And that is where I will limit. So many of us add at point 3, and you find your document has got 3 theories. So you are like that doctor who will give you a drug for the head, theory, a drug for stomach, and a drug for the knee. Remember, the 4 variables are addressing one thing. That is your problem. So they are all related. So your theory should explain the 4. And I want to look at what we have said in a document. So allow me to, let me just check whether there is any question. So good, okay, to be attending. Yes, Kibet, all right. What is the best way to identify such gaps? John, we have not gotten to gaps. That is what we have been talking. We shall be talking about soon. I think conceptual framework. Yes, my dear Sam, we are getting to a conceptual framework. We are at a point of talking about theoretical. We haven't gotten to that, but that is where we are coming to, and what you have put, we shall discuss in a minute. So allow me to share a document that explains how you identify a theory, It is an example. It will be explaining to us just what we have talked about. All right, so I hope it is clear on your end how to identify a theory. So on my left, it is the process that we have explained. On my right, it is an example. So I want to identify the theory to use in my study. This is an example. So I was using the theories of learning because the document I am going to share with us on an example will be a student work on performance. So I am dealing with performance of students. So I identify all the theories of learning. All the theories of learning. That is what we call a cluster. And then from that cluster, I identify specific ones that best captures my area. I identify specific one. So there are about 20 theories of learning. So from there, I have been able to identify 3. Self-involvement theory, behaviorism, these are 4. Cognitivism, and then constructivism. So those are the 4 that I feel they best capture my study. So when I'm coming now to selecting the theory, this is supposed to be student involvement, not self-involvement, because that is what I have picked here. And I'm doing this from the work of a student that I'll be sharing with us in a minute. So I have picked from the cluster of 20, I have selected 4 that best captures my study. So I now go deeper to look at the propositions of each, of student involvement, behaviorism, cognitivism, and then constructivism. So from the 4, the one that best captures my work is the student involvement theory. So that is how I will anchor my study on. And then from there, I will now go further to show all the propositions of the study. Now I explain it in details and how it anchors on the study and all how I am anchoring it on the study. So this explains what we have just said, how you identify a theory. So those who find their documents with 3 or 4 theories is because you stop at here. Then you want to pick each one of them and pick a variable and say self-involvement is explaining variable 1. So what are you saying? You are delinking variable 1 from 2, from 3, from 4. So these ones, I don't know what they are addressing, because you selected the 4 because the 4 influences the problem or the dependent variable. So that is how you select the theory. Then you'll be looking at how do you state a theory. So after selecting, let me stop sharing this. So how do you state a theory? Let me go back to the Word doc. The slides in a minute. Allow me to present back the slides as we move to how you present. So we have looked at how you identify a theory, So we have just said there are those 4 steps. The best one is the first one, from discipline-based literature, and then you do those 4 ways. Then how do you state a theory? How do you state the theory? Number 1, you start by naming the theory. So I am anchoring my study on student involvement theory, and you don't stop there. Who is the originator? When was it developed? Which year was it developed? From there, you state the propositions or the hypothesis of the theory. From there, you identify 2 or 3 studies which have used the theory. From there, you state the strength and the limitations of the theory. And then you explain why you will use the theory despite the limitations. And finally, show how your study will contribute to the body of knowledge related to the theory. So you must start by naming who developed the theory. What does the theory say? Who else have used this theory? What are the strengths and limitations of the theory? Because it doesn't mean it is perfect. But despite the limitation, why will you anchor it on your study? And then you show how your study will contribute to the body of knowledge related to theory, because that is the essence of stating a theory and identifying the theory. As simple as that. And I know many of us have a challenge stating the theory, because what we do, you will look at my work, I used theory X, and that theory X, I had stated it from someone who quoted it, and that is what you want to quote. Yes, this theory X was put forward in 18 something. Why aren't you able to get to the original person? And it is possible, because many of the research book will have given theories, or even not research, from our discipline. And that is the reason why in any university, you will first do coursework. From coursework, you now start your thesis. Unless you are doing a PhD by thesis only, many universities that have coursework, they will first do coursework so that you are well grounded in your discipline. You now know the theories that you can state. If you ask me to tell you 5 theories in education, I would not struggle. I would tell you cognitive theory. It was put forward by Piaget. You know, you go to a developmental theory put forward by self-involvement theory put forward. I can state at least 5 with the people who developed them. Why? Because it is my discipline. And so I have grounded myself. I was grounded when I did the coursework. And that is why you also do the coursework. So it is important to note that a theory must have the originator's name associated with it, the publication date, and these dates are normally old. Why are they old? Because remember we said it is after a long time. They must have been tested and tested. They have stood the test of time, because theories that are not supported, that have not stood the test of time, they lose their usefulness and they eventually fall away. So we don't use them. So the theories we use have been tested time and again. And that's why I started by telling you this time is not defined in times of years or months or weeks. It is until a pattern has been formed. It can now predict a phenomena. So we'll look at an example of a theoretical framework and see some of the things that we have talked about. In a minute, allow me to share the screen. Give me a minute. We look at a theoretical framework, and it will be stemming from the example I have given of performance. So I'll show you the title of the work so that you understand what we were talking about when we were talking about theories of learning. So this is a student's work, and they want to compare the performance, the academic performance of students in the Bachelor of Education Science who learn through distance and on campus. So comparison of the two. So this person identified various theories of learning. These were their research questions. We discussed this last time. I don't want to go through it again. So if this is my title, academic performance. So I am thinking about the theories that talk about how students learn. That is why I have said theories of learning. So I will go to literature and read. So this person read the many theories and they were able to identify the student involvement theory. This part here is the introduction part of just what is learning and they are relating it to their problem. So the study is anchored on the student involvement theory that was put forward by who in 19 what, and what does he say, what is involvement, etc. Then they talk about what the theory says, their propositions. They talk about the theories concerning the theory. And as you are discussing these propositions, you relate them to your problem. Then they have also discussed other studies who have grounded their work on the theory. And how was the theory? How did they use to explain the theory? And then they talk about the strength. You talk about the strength and the limitations of the theory. So the theory has a number of strengths, and I'm sure they have also talked about their limitations. They're also talking about the limitations of the theory. Then from there, they will explain why will they anchor? Why are they anchoring their study on that? And it is as simple as that. And you cannot do this by asking people, tell me the theory that I can use. It is your problem. It is your problem that should dictate. And it is from this theory that you'll now be able to draw the conceptual framework so that you can show, as you are discussing, you can show what are the relationship between the variables of your study. If we had time that we could read this theory, by the time we are finishing, it can tell you the variables of this student. You know, they were measuring age, gender, learning, environment, instructional methods, and social commitments. If you read this theory, it can give you the variables of the study. They did pick age and identified a theory. They didn't pick gender and identify a theory because all of them are supposed to be addressing academic performance. They have also said the theory has got its limitations, but it will be appropriate. Why? Why will it be appropriate for this study? So that is how you state the theoretical framework. It is as simple as that. It is as simple as that. And if only we did our work of doing preliminary literature review well, there would be no problem. It would be so easy for us to write this particular part. So from here, let's move to the conceptual framework. Allow me to share back the screen, the slides after that example as we complete our class for today. So this is an example of conceptual. So we move to conceptual framework. So we said conceptual is the structure. It is a structure. It is the network of the concepts. That means the variables you are studying. It is that house, that structure of the house, the way the stones and and anything, the cement and the sand, the way they were linked together to form the structure. And Myers and Huberman defines a conceptual framework as a visual or written. So that takes us to the question, should conceptual framework be presented only diagrammatically? The answer is no. The answer is no. It is not a must. You can present your framework as a visual or written. That means it can be graphical or narrative. Why? Because it is showing us this presumed relationship between variables. So whereas the theoretical has explained, the conceptual framework shows us how they are related, the relationship between the two. And a conceptual framework is therefore a conception or a model. That means if it is presented graphically of what you want to study, it defines the focus. So when I look at your conceptual framework, I can be able to tell even how you will analyze your data, because it is showing me the key factors that you are studying and how you are going to organize, how you have organized the key factors, the key concepts, and the variables. So this network of interlinked variables, the network that shows us, in a building, we see the structure. In research, we see the structure is called conceptual. And that structure is telling us how the variables are linked. What is the presumed relationship? And I think that is where I think Wario was asking about hypothesis and conceptual framework. And I'll be showing you that in a minute. So a conceptual framework informs and describes the development of research questions, design, selection, data collection, analysis, presentation. Now, when we say that a conceptual provides a rationale for the study, we mean that a conceptual framework, it is the one that informs, it gives focus. When I look at your conceptual framework, because a conceptual framework goes further to show the indicators of your variable, you can tell whether this is a workable problem or not. Because the way you have stated the indicators to measure the variable can determine, you will ask yourself, what design is going to measure this one? Because we said conceptual is a way of measuring. So some researchers emphasize the importance of grounding conceptual framework in the literature, and this is stemming from the sources of conceptual framework that you'll be looking at. So remember, conceptual framework informs and describes the research process. It is the one that informs. And that is why I hope you can see now why you need to do these things even before you start writing, so that you can know whether the variable I have come up with will be measured by the indicators that I have put across. So conceptual is derived from theory. Now, should we have the two? You can see the answer is yes, because conceptual, you derive it from the theory. That means what the theory is explaining what the theory is explaining, it will be shown, that relationship will be shown in the conceptual framework. And that is why we normally start with theoretical framework. Then we bring to conceptual. Then we come to conceptual. But remember, I told you, this may differ from one institution to the other. So please follow the guidelines of your institution. So theoretical should come first, explaining how the variables are related. Then conceptual comes in to show how they are related. So conceptual should be arranged in a logical structure, showing how the variables relate with one another. It should also show the series of action the researcher intends to carry out in a research study. For instance, the research questions addressed in that conceptual framework and the hypothesis. And I think this is where Wario got the question. And I'll be showing you an example of that. Researchers can adopt existing framework, but it would be important to modify it to fit the variables of your study. So why do we draw conceptual framework? To explain the relationship between variables that is stemming from theory, to enable us generate research question and justify the research methods. I don't want to labor much on that. These are things that we can look at later on. So I want to show us two examples of theoretical framework in a minute, so that we can get the difference between the two. So give me a minute, I share my screen. I'll start with the first one that is stemming from how to identify. Now, let me remove the web page so that maybe it becomes a bit clear on your end. But unfortunately, you may not see the whole document. So this is a part of introduction. So this is the conceptual framework, and majority of us, and as I was copying it here, there is a problem that I rose and I want to mention. Now, normally we don't join the variables, so we don't draw them like this. There should be a separation between this variable and this one. We don't join the two. So it was a problem that when I copied it from a student work, it now joined all the boxes, but they shouldn't. So, but this work had four variables, four independent variables: knowledge and skills, decision making, conflict, and income generating. And then there was a moderating variable, which is monitoring and evaluation. And then there is the dependent variable, which is sustainability or forest conservation. So what this conceptual framework does, it explains so much. It explains the research questions, like this is research question 2. So even before I go to the document, I can state this research question that a student will be measuring the influence of monitoring and evaluation on sustainability of forest project. Now, this is hypothesis 1. You know, it is hypothesis 1. Of course, it is supposed to be H01, but he wrote it as H.1. So he will be looking at measuring the significant relationship between knowledge and skills and sustainability of forest project. That is what they will be measuring. So there is a lot that you can read from the conceptual framework when it is showing us the relationship, the variables of the study. So, and mainly, like what I have seen with majority of the student, majority of them, I hope, oh yeah, I'm sharing the Word document. This is how they draw the conceptual framework. Or some universities will require you to show the hypothesis of the study and to show how they relate with one another, the relation, because we have said the work of conceptual is to show us the relationship between variables, and you take it further to show what are the statistical tools that you will use. And that is what this person has done. Please note that this should not be joined. And I think the other one I'll be sharing, it has not joined them. Number 2, note when you put the bold line and when you put broken line. Most of the time, if you put broken line in your conceptual, it means this variable has an influence on this relationship, but I will not be measuring it. And especially if you have an intervening variable, that is when you put the broken line. The other thing is there should be this arrow. If you see this one, if we were to draw this one on its own, it is coming down like this. If you can see my cursor going to this one. So we don't leave it as just a line. It must have this arrow, and it is a block line because there is an influence from this one to this one. And I think I'll show you the other one. The other one doesn't have the variables, so that you get the difference between the two. Allow me to stop sharing this, and then I can share the other one in a minute so that we see the difference, because I know some of our universities, we either do the one with the theories and the one that the one that is showing the hypothesis and the one that does not show the hypothesis. So I hope it is clear on your end. Yes. So this is the one we were looking at in terms of the question on performance. So let's go to the conceptual framework. Okay. So far down. All right, so here it is. So this is the conceptual framework. So this is what I was saying. The variables, this box and this one, should not be joined. So we have a variable called democratic characteristics measuring age, entry, qualification. So these are the indicators. These are the measures of the variable called demographic. And you can see now this becomes more clear. When I look at this one, how will you measure age? And you know, when I look, if I was the one doing this work and I'm asking age, the next question should be, how will I measure age? As a continuous variable or as ordinal? Will I be asking them age group or the actual age? When I talk about entry qualification, will I be asking them to tell me whether they got an A, B, C, or I'll put them in order? I'll order them ordinal. Because if I am measuring age group, then the way I will analyze age group is different from the way I will analyze age. So there is a lot. When we say that conceptual framework focuses your study, those are questions you ask yourself before. You ask yourself even before you start writing. So by the time you are getting here, you know that when I come to the indicator age, I'll be measuring it using age group. And if I am using descriptive statistics, I can only use the mode to present that. If I'm using measures of central tendency, inferential statistics, if I have used age group, then I can only use Spearman. If I used age, then I can use t-test, I can use ANOVA, etc. And we'll be discussing that as we move along in this class so that it becomes very clear. And you can see the way I was telling you about the arrows. You know, the way you put the arrow, you must show. And if there is a variable you are not measuring, like this is an intervening variable, so it is shown using a dotted line. So when you put the dotted, it has an influence, but you will not measure it. Your main interest will be the IV, DV, or the combined relationship of the three. Again, this may differ from one university to the other. So the way this one is presented, it doesn't show the hypothesis and the research question. But even with the conceptual, I can easily state the research questions and hypotheses for this study. I don't need to go to chapter 1. I can easily state, and then I'll be asking the student, if you are saying what is the relationship between, demographic characteristics and performance in those subjects for the B.Ed students, then how will you measure? What will be the design of this? And when you go back to the research question, I think that is what they had written. Sorry about that. What is the difference between the mean? What is the difference between mean performance? And then what is the relationship between, and I think the others is also what is the relation. Already, it tells me that this student, the anchoring design will be correlation or survey. So there is a lot that you read from a conceptual framework beyond just looking at the drawing. So even as you look at as you draw, please think through what you want to study. So as we complete that part on conceptual framework, I think we have discussed, that was showing us the example of the two. The sources of conceptual we have experienced. Many of us, we know even the source of a problem is normally experience. Then the other one is literature, where you go to literature. And the final one is theory. And theory is the most recommended one. Theory is the most recommended one. And that is what you shall get when you get the notes. So presentation of a conceptual. Conceptual can be presented graphically or narratively. So it doesn't mean that conceptual should only be presented graphically. So graphically is the most common one. And that is why those who said graphical were more than those who had said narrative and those who said yes. So this is when you draw a figure that shows how the variables are related. That is when you use a figure. And it is important. The last part may sound very simple, but it is important. When using the graphical method, try to force the graphic onto one page. So don't have your graph flowing onto page 2, because we need to see, remember the conceptual is showing us the relationship between variables. So make sure that they are fitting on one page. And this is an example. And since I've already shown you with real documents, this is showing the IV, then we have the intervening, then we have the dependent variables. And don't forget, these arrows are important. They mean, if I just put one line, I am not saying that Y1 has any relationship with Z1. But when I show this arrow, it means there is an influence between Y1 and Z1. That's another example that has a question that is measuring combined influence of the IV on the DV, and that one is shown by this one. So it is shown by this arrow that is coming that way. Then we have narrative. A narrative is when you present it as a text. It explains, you don't have a graph, but you explain it as a text. That is also allowed. However, myself, and I know many of the supervisors of our work, many of the universities advocate for both narrative and graphical. So when you draw your conceptual framework and you show the graph, you also further explain it. And we have said this conceptual is explaining the theory. It is explaining that whatever variables you identified, that is what you're now showing the relationship. And that brings us to the end of our class. Get more of this from my YouTube channel. And then when you visit my website, I would, especially for those who are doing their masters at this point, I would really recommend you to consider taking a course in how to pass your dissertation and thesis and project. So I have 3 courses on my website. Research methods, which is free, and you can easily get over 90 videos. Then I also have SPSS, which I charge $149 USD. And then we have this one, which is just $45. This is about 15 videos with demonstration from when you select a topic to when you narrow it to a title, to how you write questions and hypotheses and objectives, to even the point of analysis and how you can prepare yourself for defense. So that is how the course is. And I would encourage all of us, when you are able, it is something that you can consider. It is something you can consider if you are able to do that. All right, so let me check whether there are questions. Gavin, happy to attend, most welcome. I hope you shed light on using a working hypothesis as a conceptual framework. And okay, let's see. Working hypothesis as a conceptual framework, and in case it's used, should be diagrammatic structure accompanying it. Jeremiah, I'm not sure I understand this question. What maybe I can explain, but you can still send it or even send into the group. I hope you are in our group. Is that a conceptual framework should show us which hypothesis will be tested by which variables. So this working hypothesis, in the first place, I don't know working hypothesis in research, what it means, but please, you can put it on the question or even on the group, or you can send it to me. I will look at it. But the conceptual framework should show us which hypothesis will be tested by which variables. That is the work. That is what it does. when you are drawing, like, and I have shown you an example. I have shown you an example of that. SPSS course is a certificate attended, awarded. Yes, it is awarded. Yes, there is a difference, John, between theoretical framework and theoretical review. When we are doing our literature review, we normally review conceptual. There is conceptual literature review and there is theoretical literature review. And I think maybe it will become more clear when we start, when we talk about literature review. Theoretical literature review or review of a variable is where you are identifying the gaps, where the study that you are studying relating with what others have done in literature and identifying the gap. In other words, showing your voice, showing the voice so that we know you are studied. And that is what we call the theoretical review. And I know now our example, we have said, we have already explained what is a theoretical framework. So I'm sure, John, you shouldn't have a problem with that. Let's see this question. Jabo Prof, I think conceptual framework as the linkage between variables, clearly showing how they interact and the effect of other variables such as envy. Kabisa, that is true, Sam. What is the, John, you're asking the best way of identifying gaps in literature review? Allow me to respond to that when we shall be looking at literature review. Another person is saying we are advised to pick an area that you have an interest in. Exactly. And next week but one, our class will focus on research problem so that we explain further and so that we discourage all of us from asking us to give you a problem or to give you a title. I told you a title is English word. It is a sentence that is saying nothing. Thank you, Karia, for that. Study should be from an area of interest. Kibet, I would like to be attending on the time. Okay, sorry about that. How many specific objectives should a doctorate research have? Now, this again, it depends with the university. In my university, masters should have 4, PhD should have 6. So this one, it is nothing cast on the wall. I cannot tell you that we should have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Diploma in our university have 3. Masters, that is undergraduate, masters are required to have 4, and then PhD are supposed to have 6. That is my university. So follow the guidelines of your university. Thank you. Do we have a construct framework? No, not any I have had, unless we do research more, because we talk about conceptual. So even in the conceptual framework, if I had a construct, I wanted to measure pain, I will be showing how I will measure it. Tony says, you are a great teacher. How wish I thought this way from my undergrad. Thank you for that. This is good. You have opened my eyes in the area. Thanks a lot. Thank you for the invite. I love your work, Prof. Good. I think the others are appreciation, and I thank you so much for that. I'm grateful for attending class. This lesson will be available on YouTube. So in case you missed any part of it, then you will be able to get it on YouTube. So until the 3rd week, so our classes are first and the 3rd week, and then the 2nd and the 4th, we do a poll so that it informs our point of discussion. Thank you very much. Have a good time wherever you are. Bye.